Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Connected Warrior Tough Plus Love. I'm Scott Hewlett. It stuck with me when I heard a captain say, "It's lonely being the only member of the Common Sense Club." As with most tongue-in-cheek sayings, there's a grain of truth in the black and white and a lot of nuance in the gray. More important than if we are right about what we think is why we think we are right to begin with. There are a lot of variables that build the lens through which we see the world. Experiences, work and societal culture, group identity, ideologies, and the mediums of media, to name a few. Through our filtered reality, we make decisions and form opinions on norms, values, topics, and issues, for which we don't have the time and energy to make the necessary deep dives to form educated perspectives. Some alternative viewpoints seem obvious, but until they're pointed out, we don't always see them. Some can even seem inconsequential and benign, so much so that we don't consider how they might impact us. Take skulls and flames, for example. They are universal images used in countless variations to symbolize and communicate our profession to each other and the public. Why don't we use images of living people in water? Aren't those better representatives of our purpose? Is there more to it than the fact that it won't sell merch or be a cool tattoo? Is ego at play? How does choosing to identify with the job through symbolism of threat and death affect our mentality? We are all very familiar with the public using the terms hero and heroic when referring to us in our work. The giants before us and their storied actions created the brush with which the public paints us all, regardless of what we have done. Is just showing up to work in uniform heroic? Are our lives truly placed in jeopardy every day of our career? If enough people thank us for our service, whether we have provided any or not, or call us heroes before we have even taken the second step on the journey, we can quickly and comfortably fall into the fantasy. It's easy to take a role in a story that has already been written, to walk a trail that has already been blazed. We start to believe the hype. Not all firefighters take the label of hero to heart. The common refrain in post-incident interviews is, "We were just doing our jobs," which, in most cases, spare a few outstanding events and actions, is true. However, we would all benefit from the reminder that true heroes are untrained citizens with no personal protective equipment, putting themselves at risk to save strangers. How we define things in ourselves matters. The things we tell ourselves and each other do too. You've probably heard, "I leave work at work," but you probably haven't heard or used the phrase, "I leave home at home." We've all experienced being at work and worrying about things that aren't going well at home, especially now that we are always connected. So why would we think we can put work out of mind? We don't have a mental switch which we can consciously turn on and off. We live a fluid existence, and our brains don't differentiate or compartmentalize. We've all had incidents that have lingered with us, even though we've been trying to get better at helping ourselves and each other with processing them. Not everything we have been doing is necessarily beneficial, despite our best intentions. There are common adages that we pass on to recruits and probies to help them prepare for what's to come. One of the most common is, "Kid calls are the worst." The detriment of doing this is that we prime our brains and theirs with something that won't always be the case for everyone. When you hear over and over throughout your career that kid calls are the worst, the moment dispatch advises that the call you are responding to involves a child, you are already set up in your mind that this is going to be traumatic, which makes it much more likely that it will be harder to process. The other side of the coin is that if it ends up being a traumatic call and you aren't feeling affected by it afterward, you could start to question if something's wrong with you. And as much as people might appreciate being warned that something's going to be bad, it doesn't help if we don't tell them what to do about it when it is. This equates to fire attack training starting and ending with, "Fires are dangerous, and you can get killed fighting them." Why don't we simply tell each other to take the calls as they come? And if we have trouble with them, whenever it comes up, be aware of it and address it in healthy and effective ways that we know work. If our first thought after hearing that is, "I'm not a peer supporter, so I can't help you with that," then we have failed ourselves and those around us by ignoring what we could learn about coping and recovering. The exposure of a gap in our knowledge and skills in any regard should spur us to grow in that direction. This should be the foundation of our culture. Emergency services aren't the cultural bubble we think they are. The people that make up the professions make up the society at large. In both, there has been a shift away from a tougher, more personally accountable approach to something softer and more protected. Currently, we have people from both extremes sharing the workplace. Being able to dig deep, put yourself aside, and get things done is a necessary part of training for and responding to emergencies. This is called firefighting, not fire easy. It's a dirty, gritty job at times, and requires a hardness to engage and persevere. But living in warrior mode ignores the rest of what makes us human, and ironically makes us less effective in the short term, and less likely to do the work for the long term. It appears to be noble, selfless, inspiring, and admirable, but it is arguably rooted in fear. Fear of losing the ability to be a warrior when called on, as if allowing true relaxation to settle in will make us permanently complacent, soft, and weak. Fear of not being valued, even by our family and friends, which is rooted in the core belief that we perpetually need to earn love, approval, and acceptance. And the fear of confrontation. If we are always seen as the alpha, then we are less likely to be questioned or challenged to change and grow. Always being hardened, vigilant, and prepared can also act as an avoidance technique, a coping mechanism for not wanting to deal with the personal issues we need to address. We would rather fight wars outside of us than the wars waged inside. It is a negative feedback loop that exists in our culture that is intensified by our work. Being able to acknowledge all the emotions that come with the human experience, understand where they come from, and process and express them determines the quality of our mental and physical health, longevity, and relationships, especially given the challenges associated with our work. But if we are unable to differentiate between stress and expectations, and punishment and accountability, then we'll be more focused on how the job isn't working for us instead of how we are working for the job. We will feel unwanted, unprepared, and unfulfilled, and miss out on a personal growth opportunity that is embedded in the calling. We should always work together to create a more equal opportunity culture and do our best to eliminate the toxicity of abuse and harassment. That isn't debatable. Safe workplaces are paramount, but safety doesn't mean being free of challenges, standards, and ownership for ourselves and others. The irony to be found in kowtowing and attending to every concern and need of every individual is actually disrespectful, because we are assuming that people can't rise to face the requirements of the job and grow. We are making things unsafe for firefighters, their colleagues, and the community by not ingraining the seriousness of the work. People don't get saved by participation trophies. Doing this work requires toughness and softness. In a world that appears to be increasingly divisive, I straddle the old school and new school generations. Strengths can be pulled from both to ensure that we are more psychologically resistant and resilient on and off the job. There are pros and cons to each approach. Being void of emotions or overwhelmed with them aren't the only options. A connected and balanced life isn't lived on one end of the spectrum or the other. Labeling parts of ourselves and others as bad and pushing them down because we don't understand their purpose and benefit. It is being skilled at applying the proper ratio of toughness and softness for any given situation. As much as we associate the old school approach with a suck it up, rub dirt in it, and walk it off mentality, and the newer generations as more in touch with their feelings, the idea of balanced body and mind isn't new. Take something as simple and profound as the yin-yang symbol. In 2018, Cartwright wrote in Yin and Yang Definition World History, quote, "The yin and yang principles date from the 3rd century BCE or even earlier. Yin and yang is a fundamental concept in Chinese philosophy, medicine, and culture in general. As the yin and yang black and white circle symbol illustrates, each side has at its core an element of the other, represented by the small dots. Neither pole is superior to the other, and as an increase in one brings a corresponding decrease in the other, a correct balance between the two poles must be reached in order to achieve harmony." End quote. There is a saying that it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Jordan Peterson speaks to this concept when he says that a virtuous and good person is someone who learns to become a monster and then learns to control it. Carl Jung, whose work Peterson studied in depth, said, "How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. This concept not only applies to the constant flux of our psychological state, but to the impermanence of all things in life, and to how we can seek to be more connected and balanced with ourselves and others through our work. A true definition of a warrior is an integration of all the aspects of being human, and a way of being that allows us to be fully who we are, whether at work or home, and freed from changing masks depending on where we are and who we are with. The concept of the connected warrior opens our perspective on what constitutes an effective and healthy first responder. A good peer supporter is a perfect example. The goal of a peer supporter is to be part of helping those who struggle to regain a sense of agency and control in life and work, to guide and empower them to return to thriving. We don't help anyone by taking all accountability for their health and healing away. All of us, at our lowest points, still need to take some ownership of our lives. And at our best, we need to embrace it fully. If we all worked to support our peers, we wouldn't need peer support teams. We would be genuine, authentic, approachable, respectful, and passionate, but very clear and serious about the work. We would explain the why behind everything, demonstrate skills, and scaffold people as they take the journey to mastering the hard and soft skills of the job, while holding fast to expectations and standards. This is operationalizing compassion. If you truly want to give people the best opportunity to be effective and hold people accountable for their well-being and performance, this is the middle way. In Buddhism, it's also known as the middle path. Tracing the curved line in the yin and yang integrates these Hindu and Chinese principles and philosophies. Being a connected warrior is an integration of being self-aware and caring for yourself as you would care for a friend, and having an open and balanced view of others and the world around us. It is turning the feedback loop back to a more positive direction. Striving to be a better human being results in being better first responders, and vice versa. Compassion, empathy, concern, and personalization in the proper amounts can keep you more focused on the problem at hand and push you to find and enact solutions faster, like searching inside a structure fire as if the people inside are your own family, or caring for the elderly woman having chest pain as if she was your grandmother. Even on calls where people are deceased when we arrive, and it is unlikely we can change the outcome, there is still a lot we can do in these moments. Ways to help and be of service on a powerful level. A few years ago, I was part of a response to a two-car collision involving a driver under the influence running from the police, who T-boned an SUV containing a mother and her 3 young children. Multiple police, fire, and ambulance crews responded and worked together to try and resuscitate the family members. The intoxicated driver was pulled from his car before it caught fire and eventually recovered. Bystanders had removed the children and I removed the mother, but despite our resuscitation efforts, they did not survive. I'm certain that it is still argued that placing an emotional barrier between us and the people we help is the only way to do the work required, and weather the volume of incidents over a career. Through this experience and many like them, I would argue that the approach is counterintuitive and counterproductive, and is causing us more harm than good. Many people, including myself, were deeply moved and affected by the incident. But what I experienced in myself and witnessed in others showed that it is through connection during the call that we are able to pull the good that we did, carry that forward, and help mitigate the trauma. I find myself talking, either verbally or in my mind, to patients. I told the mother, it's okay. Not that it was necessarily going to be fixed, but that she and her children were not alone. That we were there with them and wouldn't leave them. It was a warm, sunny day, and she was slightly exposed as I carried her across the busy intersection to the arriving ambulance. There were bystanders all around, and I apologized to her that I wasn't able to cover her up as I moved her to the stretcher. While I was helping the paramedics work on her, I told her that once they had her, I would go and help with her children. When I arrived there, as my colleagues worked feverishly to revive them, I comforted them as I would comfort my own children. Again, to make sure they knew they were loved and cared for in this terrible moment. Lastly, I briefly helped the driver who caused the tragedy, which took every bit of professionalism and grit that I could summon, through all the anger, disappointment, and frustration that I felt. If we were outcome-based that day, or simply task-oriented. That choice to be disconnected would ignore how we truly felt. Through being present and connected, we were the people their loved ones would have wanted with them when they couldn't be there themselves. It is the highest calling and privilege of what we are meant to do when there is nothing we can do. To be with people and love them when they pass. To be connected warriors. To be tough plus love.